Dr. Jazz.
I'll never forget it
Dr.
because we were
Jazz.
so like we're going to New York, you know,
Exactly.
to New York. We both went to. He left school. I went to the same school he did, and um, he went out to Minneapolis, where I'm from, and
Mm.
I remember he just like he took the town. He just it was like he took the town. It was like crazy. It was like on fire. Nobody ever heard anybody play like that, you know. And so then he and we got this gig at kind of a revolving restaurant, and we had a trio, and it was nice. And so the there was a lead singer guy that he would be like, he would always like he'd seek out which woman he wanted to sleep with, and then he and then he would go, he'd go, okay, take it over, fellas, and we just had the whole night to ourselves. So like, and nobody could fuck with us because he was the boss.
Sure.
And so, he, so we're up there playing. Now he sings. Now he sobs. We're like, you know,
That's a good.
we were like, yeah, you know, ding, 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 ding. Nobody could do anything. Like that's weird music. No, fuck you. And then Peter and I don't know if he ever told you this, but we were so serious, getting to that point. He moved out about 9 months ahead of me.
Yeah, yeah.
We would rehearse every fucking day, just for hours, just.
Yeah.
And when we got out there, it didn't take long. We got this duo gig at it's called 1/5 Avenue, and it was kind of like walking distance from Bradley's. You probably
Yeah.
know
Oh,
where.
yeah. Yeah, sure. I know Bradley's. Yeah.
People would come in from there and they go, "Who are you guys?" Because it was like really, we were just like we were going like, man, all that practicing paid off.
So you guys basically immediately when you came to New York, you started playing, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Amazing.
I mean, I, back then, I don't know if it's like this anymore, but people had jam sessions. They were very formal, and so like you would invite somebody, and sometimes there would be somebody there with a name. So like one time, John Abercrombie came over to
Oh man, really?
yeah, and so we played, and that's kind of how you networked, and you know,
Man. Oh, how was that like with John, by the way?
well, cool. It was really relaxed. It was,
Mm.
there was, we just played, um, and so like when you'd be sitting there, you're trying to be cool, and then finally, finally, be like, "Can I have your number?" And I'm like, "Yes," like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's how it happened. Then, you know.
Yeah, it's beautiful. No, I wanted to start actually this talk. Speaking of musicians who passed away, about asking you about Ron Miles. Actually, I listened to Laughing Barrel the other day, and I had this talk with Brandon Ross also a while ago, and that album for me of Ron's, it's just like the tunes are, of course, the compositions are,
Yeah,
incredible melodies. But like, what was your experience with him like? Since
well,
he's
his writing was playing. It was so pure, and his writing also. And what I really got from him, I never practiced this myself when writing something, but the tunes are deceptive because they move through like different signatures, but you don't hear it
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
writing it. And then he said, "Well, the the blues wasn't 12 bars," and I went, "You're right." I was like, "Yeah, it's just like if you listen to Robert Johnson, it's just going.
Yeah.
There's no 1 4 5, you know." So he wrote like that. I really admired that, and I was almost afraid to. Said, I'll just come off like I'm trying to copy him. It's too good. I'm gonna leave it alone. But it was so different from people.
Yeah.
Not putting it down, but now everybody's like you know hyper odd meter. To the point that it doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
you know nothing against, but
No, no, I know what you mean exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, like if you listen to Dave Holland, what they did already, like Conference of the Birds or whatever, or
yeah,
1911.
yeah,
Yeah,
it feels normal. I mean, it's musical because there's a reason for it.
yeah, it's natural. Yeah, yeah.
Steve Coleman got into that. I played with Steve, but not in his band. But Steve, those tunes,
Yeah,
his
yeah,
bass.
sure.
So when all started, then everybody went crazy. It just until
Yeah,
food. But it's like everybody just went crazy. It was like everybody's like, yeah, man, I got this blues and this bar is 7, then it goes to
exactly. Yeah.
even
I,
that saying 7 now. That doesn't sound like anything.
no,
Now,
true. Unless it's like in triplets over 19 and the structure is 11 bars.
and then mirrors.
Yeah, exactly. True. Almost. But no, I wanted speaking of Conference of the Birds, like let's
Yeah,
say I don't know what's that 1971 of you were
yeah,
like 17 or a teenager, like
yeah.
you remember what were the records that got you excited like in that period, or concerts
Yeah.
that you saw like jazz wise or bass wise even, that you were like, oh man, what the fuck is this? That's like
Do you really want to hear the story?
oh please.
Okay. Well, I played. It's interesting. It's just like Dave. I played guitar, Dave Holland,
Really?
and yeah, and I started out as a guitarist. I like 14. And I sometimes I wish I would have stayed with it, but it lost meaning to me when because of the music I was involved or
Hmm.
interested in, and so my influences. I started to let's see. Charles Mingus,
Hmm.
like Carter. I'd listen to all the Miles Quintet stuff, and then Richard Davis. I like,
Oh
especially
yeah.
like Out to Lunch.
Oh man. Yeah.
That album blew my mind, and Richard Davis, and then um, and so I was really the bass fascinated me. It seemed like it also fit my personality. It just seemed more my I was shy. And I mean, I know it might not seem like that now, but I still am. And it was just more of an inward instrument, and I felt
Hmm.
like I didn't have to be out front, but I knew right then I sensed, but you can really create a lot of things
Yeah.
happening. So I, I listened to that, and then I saw Mingus. Well, it was a summer. Was it my last year in high school or I just graduated? I can't remember. The thing was, but it was a summer of I heard everything, and in 2 years, like that's what it was, and it was like I heard like the fusion thing, so I heard like Mob Issue, I heard all these bands started to come to town, Return to Forever, And then I knew who Miroslav Vitas was,
Mm.
so I saw Weather Report,
Oh
and
wow, man.
that Weather Report,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and well, I saw the other one too, but that's another story. And then with Jocko,
Oh yeah,
um,
sure.
but then I went to see Charles Mingus. It was in the fall of 72,
Mm.
73. So I was like 19, and I heard that band with Don Pullen and George Adams, and
Oh yeah.
it was Danny
Danny Richmond probably. No, Doc Hammond. Oh yeah.
on drums at that, and I just flipped out. I mean, I had a seat. There was a theater called the Guthrie, and it was like a thrust stage, so you were like immersed into the stage, watching it. So it came out into the audience. So I was sitting like right behind Don Pullen, and then I saw Mingus come out, and then everybody had like two or three music stands, and they just like
Man.
and then I'm sitting behind Pullen, just seeing these charts, and that's when I didn't know anything about music. It just looked impressive, I was like, I mean, I knew, but you know what I mean. And so like, I was like, whoa, and then there's a whole visual thing too. Like Pullen had on they weren't dressed like what I thought, like the MJQ or something coming out in
Mm.
tux.
Yeah, yeah.
They had like flannel shirts, and I really dug that too, And Mingus had this big giant smock, and he smoked a pipe, and then I just remember all of a sudden, bam, and I was just like, you know, I said, that's it. I'm playing this instrument.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, there's like I can imagine that quartet, man. Yeah. With Mingus, and yeah. Must have been amazing, yeah.
Well, it was really powerful, and it told me I was going like, I heard this whole 2 years of all the fusion, everything, and I said, why does this music feel like more electricity than the music here that's electric? I mean,
Yeah.
I still like, but I was like, this is like, wow, So I started on that path from that, and I checked out all kinds of bass players. I just checked out everything, and was really, and then I started to seriously study, and then
Hmm.
I started to just kind of, I mean, where I live, I mean, the music, there wasn't much going on, so you just had to live through records or radio, and it was really the equivalent of living behind this is an old phrase, but behind the Iron Curtain. I mean, it's like he was completely cut off. He didn't get anything except from maybe a 2-hour radio show or
Mm.
jazz radio show. So that informed you. And one day I happened to go by a record store, and I saw this album. I didn't really know what it was. It said ARC. you know, Chick Corea. I was like, oh, I heard of Chick Corea. Dave Holland. I kind of knew. I said, who is this Dave Holland? I'm always dreaming about Barry also. Of course, So I take it home, and then I also bought this other one. I bought two others, Circle Paris,
Yeah.
and then Conference of the Birds.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay, let's see. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that did it, man. That did it. I was like, I said, holy shit. And it influenced me a lot because the players I started to gravitate towards were people that could embrace all different styles.
Mm.
I was, I, I mean, I was listening to everybody like Ensemble, Chicago. I dug, and I would, that was kind of my influences, and I really wasn't into bebop because I couldn't hear the bass. I
Yeah.
didn't like, I don't care about this shit, and I was so bass. So when I heard, Miles and that quintet, and I could hear Ron, I was just like, oh, and I started, from that was my way of like imitating and playing along, just to
Yeah.
like, and it helped me develop my sound because I was, and then I knew I had to get a handle on this instrument and study for real, and so then I, went to school. I got a partial scholarship, and I studied with a bassist. He's really influential with bassist with Minnesota Orchestra, and so I studied with him throughout college, and he really, I mean, my technique, I really owe it
Mm.
to him, you know, and he was very open. But I didn't really go to jazz school, so you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't go. I didn't. Where I went, where Peter went, was University of Wisconsin, but it was Eau Claire,
Yeah.
and so like they had a jazz, what they call lab band. So you don't really. I mean, all we did was read charts. I mean, there was no, and there wasn't really any improvising. It was just reading charts, which was good for me. I mean,
Yeah. Sure.
and I valued. So I was in that, and I was in the chamber orchestra, and then I was in the symphony orchestra, and so it fit with my philosophy of just like, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. I want to just take it all in.
Yeah. That's really important. Yeah. I mean, it's in the end, it's all music. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
And so then I was also influenced by people like Barry Guy, and
Oh, really?
oh yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. I really loved him, and so I kind of I said maybe I'll be like that, somebody that can play in a symphony but also improvise, music and but yeah, I have all people. If people saw my vinyl collection, they go, "What the hell is this?" I got everything. I mean, I got there's an album he did with Derek Bailey. It's called
Yeah.
He's 1903. How many
Yeah.
people?
I know it. Yeah.
Yeah,
With Paul Rutherford later. I
yeah,
mean, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
yeah. So
Oh,
it
wow.
was
I did not. I mean, kind of know it makes sense because, I saw you played with Mark Sanders and Peter Brötzmann. And I was like, where did you come with those guys? When I have you on records, it's like, Gary Thomas, Jerry Allen, your records and stuff like that, and Dewey and
yeah.
then it's like I saw this footage on YouTube, like you with Peter Brötzmann. It's like, man, you fit like like a hand in a glove. Like it's just like so natural what you play. And I was like, well, I have to ask you this. Like, and now you kind of explained it, like almost, yeah.
Oh man, I was so into that the European. There was a difference.
Mm.
My ear, and I really liked the European. I hate that word, free jazz
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. What I know. Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. And so I was like, I had all the FMPs, like Machine Gun,
Really? Oh, wow.
I had all that stuff. And Derek Bailey with, the EC,
Yeah.
cello and guitar, and I had spontaneous music ensemble. I listened to all those people, and so that's where I could hear it in these players that they the Europeans I could tell that I could hear their training,
Mm.
I could hear because like I know that Derek Bailey was a trad player, and I could hear it in there,
Yeah.
so I said, yeah, I want to be like this. I want to embrace all types of music in an honest way, not like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so yeah, I guess that's a part people don't really know, but I did a lot of that and really worked on it. You know, you must know how people get. They're so insecure and they think playing free is like bullshit, and they think making noise. You know, I used to get kind of like offended when I'd see guys sitting around and they go, "Oh, look, I'm playing free," and I wouldn't say anything, but I was
Yeah.
thinking like, "You're just full of shit," you know.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah, and
mean,
I had the pleasure of meeting Barry, and he knew me. But by this time, my career.
mm,
But I mean, I know I happened to always be in these bands that were kind of like hyper, straight ahead swing, and and but no, man, there's a lot of I I'm still. I mean, there's a few people here that I still do that. I'm right now. I'm working on a
oh, really?
project with a violinist, and his name is Kip Jones. He's in a they tour around it. He's in a string quartet, but uh, uh, and there's Michelle Kenny. She used to play with Henry Threadgill, and
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
un, unbeknownst to me, we grew up like a mile apart. You know, and my father worked with her. They worked together.
Oh, wow.
Had no idea, but because there was a dividing line, she went to one school district, and I was the other. And so,
Amazing. Yeah. No,
so
but yeah.
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 Go ahead.
But
I'm talking too much.
oh no, please. It's like it's all about you today, man. It's like I'm just listening. I love this. Otherwise I would not be doing this. It's just it's I love doing this. I did this with Barry Guy as well, and he's such a
Really?
sweet. Yeah, I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
Like what you said. Like people say, like, yeah, you're playing this free stuff, and then he started to explain his concepts and compositions, and it's stuff like, man, there's some heavy stuff going on. Then it's not like
Of course.
we're just playing, and people don't know that many times. And
The first time I heard him was this album called Angles with Terry Riley,
oh yeah,
and I said, who, excuse my French, as we say, is that? And so then I got really, that's why. Then I got really disciplined. I was playing the classical thing because I knew
mm,
I hit these phases, and like I I'm still looking for the right bass because I really want that.
mm,
But I work on my sound, and I mean from those years. Actually, sometimes I go, did I really do this? I look at my old books, and I go, did I really play this? What is this shit?
yeah,
So, but I mean, I could hear it in him, and that's what I was after. That it's that broad, full tone on the bow. That's what I'm. That's what I'm. So I analyzed that stuff to death, and he was the tops.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
never would have connected to this really. I mean, when I hear you play, I mean, dark metals. I love one of my favorite records. I spoke with Michael Cain, and we were both like raving about that band, and I'm such a Dewey fan. Also, I've been
Oh,
forever, and the compositions there that you wrote and that band, it's just like and you can sense it there. That's that freedom of within the composition and what you do, what you're saying now, but yeah, I would
well,
not think like Barry Guy would be like there, somewhere for you. Like that's quite cool to hear. Actually, I mean, I love it.
yeah. I remember I played. What did I do? It was at a festival, and he was playing with what's her name? Pianist, not Ursula Oppens, but it'll come to me. But anyway, I was walking off stage, and I think I was playing with Steve Lacy. That's what it was.
Mm.
Walked off, and he goes, "Hi, Anthony," and I went, In fact, I said, "Oh my God, you're Barry guy. He goes, yeah, he's, how he is. I'm just like, you're my hero. I'm like, I always would get that, and these guys would go, oh, come on, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna say a couple things. Dark metals. What happened was I had a lot of well, not a lot, but I was writing more. I had
Mm.
this what I wanted. This is the honest to God truth. I got in the studio and I gave the music to Dewey, and he just kind of looked at it, and I went like, "Uh oh," and so then I just that album. I basically did it spontaneous.
Mm.
I mean, like that one tune, yeah, of mine, and Mike had a tune that I wanted to do was that ballad,
Yeah.
but I think the rest was well, two of Mike's, and then the rest I just I conceived and right there. I'm not saying it's like oh I'm a genius. It was just that all of a sudden I was confronted with
Yeah, but that's
okay,
the best. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't impose what I wanted because it's not going to happen. And then I'm so glad it worked that way. You know.
How did you start playing with Dewey actually? And I mean, especially Billy. I mean, like, of course, Higgins. I mean, that's like a dream drummer, I guess. For
Yeah. Well, with Dewey, let's see, how did that relationship begin? I think he heard me, and we used to play trios like with Eddie Moore down in. I don't know how long he lived in New York, but it was a place called Visiones, and
oh yeah,
yeah, down there on what is that? Bleecker, and
yeah,
you know, like he'd walk down and you'd see the famous basketball court,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
every movie has a scene in. Um, but so I started doing these. Or was it Eddie Moore or Eddie Marshall? I can't. It was great, it was like so it was a trio. I started playing with Dewey that way.
Mm. Oh.
And the real turnaround was then we started playing there with Ed Blackwell,
Oh man, seriously? Oh wow.
and that's when that really that that really changed me. I think I was now hitting this point, and I'm sure you know this. You hit that point in your playing where you finally really hear it,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden, then it just flows out of you. And that's what happened when I started playing with Ed, and because we would sit there and Dewey would play. He just called bebop tunes. But we just I'd look up and it was like an hour and we're still playing the same tune, but it never sounded the same.
Yeah.
And I start and my analogy at the time was like, man, it's just like a kaleidoscope, just
Mm.
doing always doing this, and it's never repetitive, and it made me think totally different on the fingerboard, and it made me it opened me up. It just
Yeah.
because there was also that very conservative time in New York where all this young lions bullshit.
Yeah.
In fact, I was asked to be a young lion and I refused.
Really? Oh, wow. I didn't know. Well, interesting.
I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "I'm not ready." I'm here to learn. That's the truth. I can't. I didn't even expect I'd last. I told myself, in 2 years, if it's not happening, I'm gone. I'll go back. I'll figure something out. Really, I was like, well, maybe I'll just teach high school band and I'll somehow, you know, make recordings or something. But, that was plan B, and fortunately, it didn't work that way. But it was like, but I really, my intention always, honestly, was to learn. I was not about, being a star because I really what's this jazz star?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you start thinking that way in this music, I don't know. May as well work at the rodeo or something. I mean, you know. So, so anyway, like, so that, and oddly enough, I
Mm.
was doing that gig, and then I got a call to join Stan Guest. So it's like that's how it was for me at the time. But it's the kind of musician I wanted to be. I didn't want
Mm.
to be limited. I didn't want to. I wanted to broaden my scope, but in a way that was natural,
Yeah.
and so that I could have, so that I could experience. I just felt like that's how you grow. I'm still in that mode, really. I still am, and I stopped beating myself up, like when I practice because, sometimes I used to go, oh man, usual musician insecurity bullshit, and I started to, but that's how I am. I'm always going like, what about this? Or I'd like to work on this. Or
Mm.
I'd like to, and, and I think it's just as the older I get, I start hearing more things that I didn't hear before, and you know,
Yeah.
I've been teaching, you know, and well, I have been in the last 20 years, really. That's why when I moved back here, I was on the road since the 80s.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah.
I was on the road since the 80s, and I moved back here, and I still was on the road. I mean, I was gone. People didn't even know I lived here. And I was mostly touring in Europe and playing
Sure.
European musicians, which is, we can talk about that too, because I found that I I felt more at home because I felt like in America, it was so based on the star system and a
Mm.
leader.
Yeah.
And in Europe, I was doing projects. I was
Yeah.
like I was like a cooperative, and
Yeah. I
so
wanted. I wanted to ask you about because when I look through your discography, it kind of some things make sense, but then like you say, some are for me like really an enigma in your like where does Steve Lacy come from, or where does the Dino Saluzzi project with Friedman come from? I'm like, is this
Mhm.
you're like, is this the same player? And then you're like at the Jerry Allen record, and and then at the quartet with Scofield and John Riley, which is like one of the most understated quartets of Sco's career. I think it's that band sounded incredible. But like, how did this connection to Europe happen? I mean,
I think it was after about the mid 90, yeah, 94 and on. I really started more like that's when I think I recorded with Dino and David. He called
yeah,
me and he had this idea for a project, and I said, "Well, that sounds really great. Sounds real chamber like,
yeah,
and it was things like that." And I was like, "Let's see, who else? Like Christoph Lauer. Oh,
oh yeah,
late Danielle Humair. I used Joachim Kuhn.
Kuhn, yeah,
I was playing with all, you know, and I was playing also with the Northern German radio. Not, I mean, as a guest or
hmm,
like guest with somebody. Uh, I was doing all these things like that, and I found it more interesting, and um, because I kind of got discouraged trying to get like, well, the quartet. I knew, well, the dark metals thing. I thought I could go beyond that. Billy was then his health started failing,
yeah,
but I was frustrated because believe it or not, I'd say in the 80s through the 90s, there was a stigma again, on bass players and drummers, leading bands, and
Yeah.
the labels just didn't see it. They just thought it's not going to work. And I think somebody with my personality, they really thought it's not going to work, because and at that time, Christian McBride was coming up, and he had that personality, and in
Yeah.
fact, that's the only reason that we were on that Joe Lovano quartets thing. It's because they really wanted to push Christian,
Ah, wow, interesting. Wow.
and it was like we were the
Mm.
second. The only way Joe could get that recorded was by agreeing to do this other thing, and
Bizarre. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like, and the thing about that too is that Joe, I was part of I've told this a million times, but I always felt like, with Joe, I was like part of a revolving cast of bass players so I played in that quartet too. So did Dave Holland,
Mm.
and and of course, Maratz did stuff. So I was like, well, at least I'm in good company.
Yeah, can get better here actually.
So, but and I always felt like Joe he was, he was building his sound library, in his head. And so he saw me, he fitting in what he was, when the pianist, or, you know, uh, I'll just say pianist quartets,
Yeah, yeah,
or guitarist.
yeah,
He just, yeah, because that fit with me, because I understood that I could. It's a different way to think.
yeah, sure.
And even though you're playing through harmonic cycles, it's still a different way to think. And I could do it. I could outline
Yeah.
the harm. But anyway, so that kind of stuff was going on too. So I never was really. People just didn't know. You know. Again. Uh, uh, but then, so what I'm getting at is that by the mid like 2010, I started to just really back off
Mm.
from touring, and I was teaching. I was the chair of a department for a while, and then I was at the University of Iowa, bass department, teaching in the jazz, and I really enjoyed it because I collaborated with the classical department, and he and I said, it was funny because I said, what do you teach your what books do you use? And he goes, this, and I go, so do I. So we started laughing. And so it was things like that, and so that was rewarding. But I'd still go out. So that's kind of where it's been. And then of course, I'm teaching now at a university. It's called University of St. Cloud. It's a state university.
Hmm.
I teach bass, electric, and everything. And so I enjoy that. I like teaching because I kind of learn from my students.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
make they make me think and kind of re-examine things that I take for granted. And
yeah. I agree. I love teaching. I've been doing it for 20 years, and it's so rewarding because, yeah.
if you get, do you? Is it private or is it through a?
Now I have my own music guitar school here
Oh,
in
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I love doing this. It's just yeah, it's like you said, it's so rewarding. You have to basically put the ego aside and just be there for that guy or girl. It's just like
Right. And I've always been the type of teacher too that but I do it. It's all online because of COVID. But the school, and I'm starting to get some private students. But what I like about it is, or what I was going to say, is that I immerse myself
Mm.
way that I go, well, it's like this, and I'll mess up and sound like shit, and but I let them. I don't care. I like to let them see that because then they can see me adjust like that,
Yeah.
and that's the difference. And so I don't like to hide behind like, well, behind my name or something, and not expose myself. I just letting them know that communicates that, hey, it's all right. It's a process,
Yeah.
you know. You know. Well, why am I telling you?
No, no, please. No, but Anthony, I wanted to ask you. Just go back to the 80s, and
Yeah.
it's how did you? Stupid question, but how did you handle all that? When I checked the records you did, let's say from 1988 to 1993, there's like an immense amount of work, and you always seem to adjust to the music that you're playing, like a team player, like whether it's Scofield flat out or incredibly difficult compositions. I don't know, Gary Thomas's bands, which I love those groups, like, and how did you learn how to do that? Also regarding different styles of music, like when you were called for a project, let's say, I mean, although I guess Gary Thomas were bands, right? That was actually a group that was working, but like when you got the lead sheets or the music, like how did you proceed there, like doing all these different styles of music? And
I let's see. In Gary's case, he might send the music, or usually it didn't help. It was those days. It was those days when I don't know. It was like a little bit after the Commodore 64, and I go, what is this, and then it'd be printed out all weird kind of groupings, like, oh, that's really a triplet. Okay, it's like, uh, you know, how did I do it? Well, I guess I just it was it's hard. I don't know why it's hard for me to explain. I guess I was so immersed in the scene, and I kept telling myself, well, this is what you wanted to do. So
hmm,
I was open. I mean, without knowing it, I researched all my life, and I just didn't call it that. But so I knew how things should sound because I mean, I had a sense of it, and I I just broadened my knowledge base so that I could adapt,
hmm,
and that's
yeah.
what I was trying to do. And so, like, it wasn't a conscious thing. I never thought of it in that way. Like, I think, okay, here's what it was too. Whereas a lot of guys, they knew they knew a lot of tunes, a lot of standards and stuff. I was like, man, I learn them, I forget them. If I don't play them, I just forget them. So I just would prefer to read, look at
Hmm.
them. And I still like that because I like to figure out different ways to play.
Approach it, yeah, yeah.
And so like, what would happen is, but people found me. I wasn't that kind of guy, but I was a good reader,
Hmm,
and
yeah.
I could play in other people's concepts. So that's the word started to spread. So I could adapt real quickly to like somebody's compositions
Yeah.
or what they were doing, and that was I think that was my strength, you know.
Hmm,
I
yeah.
wasn't I wasn't Mr. Call a tune and you know, yeah. I got to where I said, man, just say yes because you don't know I don't know any of this shit, you know. Then they play and I go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, then I'm going like, oh yeah, two, okay, secondary dominant, okay, all right. But I really did. I'll be the first to say, no, I don't really, I don't know anything, and that's not true. But I mean,
No, sir, no.
just bring a chart. I don't care. And then I used to find it funny too. People would, have a chart, or maybe I had the real book, and they go, "Oh man, these are the real changes." And I was like, "How the fuck do you know?" I was like, "That's who." I said, "This is so basic. This is the way it should be, so you can interpret." Don't give me that bullshit. These are the Bill Evans changes. Well, yeah, they worked great for him.
Yeah, sure. No, but just
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, please. But I wanted to ask you this. Just go back to dark metals and you being as a band leader, and I listened to Third Kind of Blue, and which was kind of your debut as a band leader, right? With Ronnie and John Purcell.
Three of us, yeah.
Like, how did you decide? When was the moment to do that? Actually, that you felt like, okay, I'm gonna write music now, and I'm gonna lead a band. How did that happen? I mean, because that one is like swinging as hell, like some of those tunes, and what's that one? QW and Upon Arrival, and those tunes. It's beautiful stuff, And but how did you decide to do that one actually?
Well, I remember I was playing with John Faddis in his band.
Oh, really?
Yeah. See,
oh, wow. Wow, man. Okay.
I know. And it was James Williams and Kenny Washington. And,
oh, wow, beautiful.
So anyway, I was playing one night. We had a week at the Vanguard, and Ronnie was sitting in the corner, and I knew of him because I saw him when I first moved to town, and he had the it was called the Barrage Ensemble, and that was with Winton and Branford and Kenny Kirkland and Avery Sharp. So I went to see them a couple of times because it was just like so fantastic, especially Kenny. I was like, once.
Yeah, he was a monster, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like yeah, and he said we got to play together, and then he kept in touch, and then I met John Purcell, and then we talked, and we got together and just played, and then all of a sudden there was this concepts of ideas, and we started from there, and I just started to write. And some tunes I got to pull them out. I'd like to play them with other. I never played them with anybody else except them.
Oh, really? Oh man, that's a shame. Wow.
And and then it was a great band, and sometimes I regret not hanging in there with it. But I guess what I liked about it was we were all just playing music. We weren't defining ourselves as this or that. But I think they wanted to go. At the time, I wasn't into it, but they wanted me to play more electric.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
And I was like, yeah, but, and I was at this point, I said, I just feel like it's going to confuse the issue because I don't feel like I got this fucking thing together yet. My own, feeling about it. And so I just, and I think they wanted to go more in a funk direction, it's kind of it's almost like Joe Zawinul and Miroslav Vidas or something, but I mean, it was like no bad, I mean, no animosity. I just,
no, sure.
I was just like, I kind of want to do this and get this, years later, then I started getting into electric bass, but
interesting, yeah.
And the reason I really got into it was once I played with Sam Rivers and
oh man, wow.
The studio Riv big band, and also this trio. And
how was that like for you? Sorry to interrupt you, but how was Sam like? I mean, because he is one of our heroes, I guess, everyone. So like, how was that experience like for you?
Oh God, man, that was deep. I only played one tour with him,
Mm.
uh,
Oh, wow.
because well, here's what happened. Okay, I'll just say first of all, it was great because he fucking stretched. There was no either you try to keep up or just quit. And he no, I mean, I never. I mean, my brain just felt like it was doing this. I was like, God damn. I mean, it just balls out. Just don't hold back and don't
Mm.
bullshit. And that was great. And then his band, big band, and again, he hired me because I could play those charts, which were really interesting. It was very linear.
Mm. Yeah.
But I remember one thing he said when I met him at the airport. He said, "You play electric," and I said, "Well, not really." And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "I think it's got some untapped potential, like what it can do." And then I just went like, "He's right." And then but
Mm.
years later, I started to, you know, get into that. But
Mm.
yeah, so I play it now, and you know, and then that was the whole thing too of trying to adapt to.
Sure.
I'm starting to I started playing cello a while ago, and then I once again I went, do I really want to do this? And now am I biting off too much? But now I'm going to start uh, getting back. Not getting. Yeah, I'm going to get back into it, and you know,
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that. So I'm in groups now that are playing like I've done. Sometimes I've had all three instruments on stage.
Oh, wow, man. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
and so I'm into that, and I want to write more. But I think you were going to ask me something else, and I went
yeah,
off
I
on.
mean, since you said writing, I wanted to ask you, like, how did you compose those tunes, let's say, or even now, what's your, what kind of a writer are you or composer, like, how do you
Yeah,
do that?
I
Do you
strive.
need a deadline, or, how do you work in that area?
Deadline is good. That makes me, I tend to procrastinate or just sit around and have tons of. I can show you too.
Sketches and,
Yeah, I got a book over there I found yesterday, just full of, and that of ideas. But if I have a deadline, but I write more from. I'm not a write. I, I don't write. Either it's more melodic oriented,
mm,
so there's kind of the ornament
yeah,
or else if harmonically it's more color than moving in a say fashion of like two fives and
yeah, yeah.
more like that and I'm trying to I mean I'd like to develop my writing. What I need to do is start to just write just as if like when I like practicing because it is. It's just, if you don't do it you know it's not gonna
Oh, sure. Yeah,
because I know I'm a good writer, and I just I said, man, you just
yeah.
start these ideas, and then also to be not so hung up on like it's just music, like okay, right, just
Yeah,
do try it again, try something else.
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Well, what about you and band leading now for the future? Like,
Well, yeah, I for the future. Well, I feel like a lot of I want to reconnect with a lot of my my peers. Like I talked to Gary. I said, I talked to Mike,
mm,
Cain, Ferrone. I'm gonna do this kind of co-bill. Harriet Tubman is coming to Minneapolis.
oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's in June, and so I'm gonna put together this group, which will be and play electric bass, cello, and be drums, sax, and violin. And,
Oh wow, beautiful.
So so I just started last night. I was messing around with some ideas, so that, and then I kind of want to just start to I'd like to start recording a solo bass album this summer, but I want to just, yeah, that's one of my goals. It's like maybe
Oh really? Oh,
before the summer ends, I have some stuff that I recorded. Um,
how do you approach this, the solo bass? I mean, I know you did like that and this, right? Like, which is 20 years ago now. But like, what's your approach when playing solo bass? I mean, it's a huge, in the guitar world, it's like this huge people sitting on your back regard, or and I think solo bass is also like a huge beast heritage behind you. Like, how do you approach solo bass as on a concert or for record? I mean,
well, I had I had things that I wrote, and I used them as cells
mhm.
to jump off at any point, and I could refer, so I don't have to always confine myself to like some set
Oh yeah, that's good too.
cycle. I can just move on it any way I want. Uh, of course, I want to explore the bow more,
Mm.
and really kind of uh, beyond just textural playing, with the bow, but melodies are just combinations. So that's another thing where I was working on that last night. I was just thinking of fragments of melodies that that were in my mind, and how to expand on them, and maybe then create this kind of maybe part of it is it's blurred between what's written and what's not.
Yeah,
That's what I'm after. I don't want to get in it. I want that for a reason, because I want to be able to have the freedom to then actually, I think you can go deeper than into the composition.
yeah,
I don't know how do you, how you write a lot, obviously, and
yeah.
right. So you think about those things. Do you have that?
I
Do you
mean,
have
I
a
cherish
process?
more what you say in now. Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, I wrote a lot of like you said, odd meters and stuff. I was so into that, like 6 pages, constantly changing. Just wanted to explore that. And I looked
Well,
the other day of those tunes, and I was like, man, Jesus, I have to really play this, like you said before, like what? And now it's just like, I love this, either this more ornetish type that you can open up, or just like really simple stuff, like you say, just have a motive and grab it and go somewhere, and then again more
yeah,
opening up. Although I still enjoy playing changes and everything, but just like this opening up is more.
I feel like I said I seem to have this basic mental model that has this form, then tangents, allowing you to get away from the form. And I even like wrote things that and I would always tell musicians, like, don't, it's not written in stone. You
Hmm.
can go here, and this is the way it looks in my head. There's maybe a 20 bars of something, and then I have maybe an interlude, which would be in a big band term a shout chorus, but really
Hmm.
it's just, this can be to bridge to the next soloist,
Yeah.
or you don't have to. So that becomes part of the rehearsal of just understanding here's the parameters, or there don't have to be any. You know, it just depends on the musicians that I'm playing with. And I think that's the other thing too, is that there's some very good musicians that have moved out here now that you can
Explore this.
discuss concepts without somebody thinking you're crazy. So and I think that's I hope to really bear down and do that. I really so so then it becomes even. I start thinking of models in terms of textures, or
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I just allow my mind to be open enough to just grab it. And so I keep this book. I had it down here. It's upstairs. I used to use it for, well, I just would jot ideas, and I ran out of, I needed a book, to write into. So I just went to the local Target, and I just picked up one of those teenage girl diaries. And so,
That's inspiring, man.
and so it was about this thick. That's why I liked it. And I didn't even, I just grabbed it. And I looked when I got home. I started laughing because it said, "Be yourself, be awesome." Little stars. You know,
That's what we need, actually. That's true.
I'm like, wait a minute. I have another one. Oh, here, wait. Well, this is a different one. It's it's written in the stars. I was doing this for a student. I was giving her lessons. She wanted to move to New York, and I had this whole kind of thing for her to work on, and I was gonna be the gift at the end of before she moved, and she never did. But I mean, she's doing great. But then I said I kind of like this book, so now I write my dreams in it, and so. I'll tell you another thing I did. I learned it's not here. I think I put it in the wash. I wear lab coats sometimes so it gets me in the frame of mind to work, to create.
Mm,
And that's because I read Braxton's book, Forces in Motion, or
mm.
he was interviewed in. And he talked about that, where he would, and that makes sense. And sure, it's like, because, you don't go to work. Well, I mean, now I go to work, this, when I teach. And so, but when I practice it, it makes me feel like now
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's just a psychological thing, but
It is. Yeah,
it works for me.
yeah. That's really it's important. Yeah, to take time to do that. And
And so that book is a collection of ideas and that's what the guys used to joke because they would say, "Oh, you got that little girly book, huh?" And I go, "God damn right, I got this girly book. I like my girly book. No, actually, I love my girly book. Okay, so and I'll have it on stage with me sometimes, and I make notes of like what works, what doesn't, what
yeah,
order, what
yeah,
or what new idea might come in my mind because I have a tendency things they come and then they're gone. You know, you know.
yeah. No, but it's good. Yeah, I should do that as well to keep down ideas. I sometimes just forget, and
It's
yeah,
it's normal to like what we do. It's just what I mean. It's just you get these great ideas at the wrong time. Sometimes I'm like, yes, and then half my pens don't work.
exactly.
And
Been there.
the then the process just gets slowed down. And all of a sudden, oh fuck it.
Yeah, and the idea is there already, like on the bus going to I don't know where. So. But true. Yeah, amazing, man. But Anthony, I just wanted to ask you also this. You mentioned Steve Lacy before, and well, we're talking about now composing and stuff like that, or let's say Jerry Allen or someone like that. Many Jack Warrant, many great composers you played with. Did you ever talk about with these guys about composition or like?
um. Well, yeah, I didn't flat out say, "Well, how do you?" Well, did I? Maybe. We'll see. I can. Well, okay. When I did the record date with Danielle Humair and Lacy,
Mm,
uh, because I am this kind of natural researcher, there was this tune that I walked in the studio. Here we go again, and there was a chart, and I was like, and I had to borrow a bass. This was in France, and it was a full size, and so I hadn't even gotten used to it. And so there was this chart, and it's pretty involved, the bass part, but I had heard it before on a record with Lacy and Dave Holland and this drummer who was paralyzed from the hip down, from the waist down. So he played set. He had a special set,
Mm.
and I think his name was Motohiro Yoshizawa. I think.
Hmm. Okay.
Anyway, so that's me. In the recesses of my mind, and I remembered this tune, but that's it. So there it was, and it just jumps all over. I mean, there's no other way to play it. It's just bonk, just so because I kind of remembered it, I could hear it in my head, so that helps, And so then he walked in, and by the time he walked in, I was nailing it, And so, but then he was trying to vibe me out. He's like, looking over my shoulder. And I was, then I think now musicians can be really strange. You know this, but sometimes it's like, so they might vibe you out, but then they're like, oh, you can play that, huh? I'm jealous. Now I'm gonna mess with you. And I'm gonna pick apart every breath you take and every note you play. He wasn't like that, but it was just like it's kind of like,
Yeah.
give me the. I was like, come on, man. I am so not that. When I lead bands, I know the person's messing up. I'll go like, can we go over this again for me?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Pressure off of them. I went through too much of that shit. Anyway, but his compositions, they were angular. But then I asked him. I remember sitting down and I said, "So what what are your compositions? They seem to be at this point. They're all over the place, and composing for him was, I think, it's almost like haiku type thing.
Yeah.
And he just very pared down, and maybe just some ideas, and that was the composition, and and I think, and that's great. And then one time I was having dinner with Kenny Wheeler, and sometimes you learn things more from just casual conversation.
You played with Kenny also, or?
Yeah.
Seriously? Oh man, he's one of my top 3 composers. When did you play with Kenny? What was that? The occasion?
Played with him a couple times in Canada with Jerry Granelli.
Oh wow.
And David Friedman.
Oh really?
And yeah, we had a quartet, and then where we all composed stuff. And I did another thing with him, with Jane Ira Bloom, so I got to know him. And then
Really? Yeah.
And then so he did. So one day I got a fax. This is back in the '90s, and it said, "Hi, this is Ken Wheeler." He wanted me to go on tour. And it was like this killer group. It was Jan Christensen and oh fuck, who was
Oh man.
him, and who's on piano?
John Taylor, maybe piano, right? Or someone like that. Yeah.
And then the tour got canceled. I was so
Oh man.
It was all set to go. They sent me some music, and they had some recordings.
Mm.
And I was like, oh God. But I had played with him a lot prior to that, And he was really nice. But what Kenny said to me was, he said, he was just sitting there. It's kind of like the Sam Rivers moment, and he said, "Well," he's just said, he goes, "Well, you know how we all write. You know, it's just color." And he's like, "Ding,"
Yeah.
and I was like, "That's right." I mean, why didn't I know this? I mean, like, why didn't I figure it out? So
Incredible. Yeah, man. Yeah.
arranger and composer, just you know, and he was one of those people. Early. I have early, like this spontaneous music ensemble,
Yeah.
like John Stevens.
Yeah.
He's part of that. It's
Yeah. The early stuff is amazing. How free it is. With that album, Windmill
So
till yeah, it's like 1968. No one knew who Kenny was, and the writing is just like poof, already done.
I know it's just his big band stuff.
Yeah.
It's unreal, and he's just really a nice guy. He's just real quiet and he's
Yeah.
funny.
What I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, God, but
Yeah.
so
Beautiful, man. Yeah.
yeah, all these
Incredible.
people. And then like I know, didn't you interview? Marty, right? Ehrlich.
Early. Yeah. Sure.
I know Marty. I remember when he really started to get seriously into composition. He was really influenced by Julius Hemphill,
Yeah.
but we would he wrote things that to me were like little movements, suites, you know, written out, Whereas I was always more, I was trying to find some melody or sometimes a figure or you know, and then emphasize more the playing to see, we could develop,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I mean, if you have Dewey Redman in your band, or I, I wouldn't give him too many charts. I was just like, here, just play 6 notes, man, and then just play. Just like
That was a great lesson to learn, you know.
yeah,
You know, it really was because then that's what came out of it, better than anything I would have, what I had planned,
did you play gigs with that band, by the way? Like
Well,
like or mini tours or?
just one, and Billy couldn't make it, so I used a guy named Adrian Green. He was
Hmm.
from Baltimore, but that's when I kind of like it. It just it just seemed like a real uphill battle.
Yeah, what you said. Yeah, yeah,
It was really hard, and I'm not the only person. I mean, like I remember Jack DeJohnette had that problem. He said, and like Dave, for a long time, I started with Dave, uh, really right when I moved there, I studied with him,
oh
but
really? Oh,
just man, like 2 or 3 lessons because he got really sick around that time, and then I didn't see him for a couple years. I lived up in Woodstock later, and so we became good friends, and then we just hang out and play. So
mm. Ooh,
sometimes
man.
we run into each other on the road, playing at the same festival, and he was like, "Yeah, you want to get together in the hotel and play?" So he come over to my room and
Yeah, it's amazing how much energy this guy has. I mean, still nowadays, it's like
oh, I just loved that. That influenced me too. These people that I said, these people that there's something different. There's a different vibration. I mean,
mm,
they're not the people that are not. Well, there was a lot of uh, negativity in terms of like you saw this like racism, and it was like, and then I straddled like both kind of worlds, and I could see how white musicians were jealous of black musicians because they were
mm,
playing in white musicians got more money making opportunities black musicians, and then white club owners were saying they had to have black musicians in their club.
Yeah, bizarre. Yeah,
It
all these
was
things. Yeah.
so convoluted at that time. This is like the '80s, and on top of that, you had this kind of Winton neoclassicist, neo-fascist movement, in jazz,
Yeah.
which I think to me, stifled a whole generation of upright bass players to where
Mm.
they had to sound a certain way.
Yeah.
They weren't exploring their instruments, and I felt like the electric players all of a sudden started to outpace them because they were doing things that were more, like a Jonas Hellborg or a
Yeah.
Matt Garrison, all of a sudden, and I think it had a lot to do with being just kind of constantly this thing about, you swing and that interpretation of swing, and I found it to be really stupid, and like don't use an amp and
Mm.
why, what?
Yeah, exactly. Bizarre.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you agree or
I mean, yeah, I love all kinds of music, but yeah, what you said now, yeah, sure. I mean,
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot. I just
I don't know, but like, it's just like, I, if it's good music for me, it's whatever it is, whether it's classical or jazz or straight ahead and this whole Winton thing or whatever happened, like just limiting
really,
things.
it was
It's
really strange. I mean,
yeah,
I saw it go down.
yeah, you witnessed it. I mean, yeah, I didn't. So, but you actually were there, yeah.
I mean, even when his debut concert, so I saw him with Ronnie, his band, and Ronnie was writing this really exciting music,
Hmm.
kind of coming out of like a Miles mid
Yeah,
'60s kind of, and so I saw when Winton had his debut concert at Avery Fisher Hall, I think it was, yeah.
hmm.
And he put out that album with Tony Williams and Ron Carter. I saw that band.
Yeah,
It was just the most boring shit I'd ever heard, and I just couldn't. It just seemed so contrived, and I realized, like, this is the industry now really trying to codify everything.
yeah,
And I felt bad
yeah.
because I didn't think he ever got a chance to really grow into the kind of complete musician he could have been. He's like, all of a sudden there was this dogma,
Yeah.
and then overnight within the city. I mean, I know this might sound funny, but everybody was all of a sudden wearing suits, you know, and it was like, and then all of a sudden it was like you had to be, everybody had to, what's the word, justify. Everybody was like, "Yeah, I can swing, and then all these weird terms came up in the New York Times, like avant gut bucket, and I was like, what is that? All this stuff, and it's all based around everybody was afraid now to really express what they were really about, and
Hmm.
they had to conform to this way of playing, you know, and it was like I said, that's such an odd. I said, plus, well, I guess this is recorded, so I don't care. It's like I used to go like, who the fuck plays like this in the past? I don't. Roy Haynes never did this.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, sure.
What is this shit? Blakey doesn't sound like that. This idea of what swing is. It was like this heavy 2 and 4 on the hi hat. I was like, who does that? It's like Tony doesn't
Mm.
do it.
Yeah.
All, I mean, so
Yeah,
it was
it's
like,
it's bizarre. Yeah. Yeah.
so it turned out these guys, to me, with their strings about this far off the fingerboard, and they're just like, and I was just like, what? I don't know, man. It's not swinging to me. I don't know.
I don't know, but no, the thing that bothered me or still does is like, that's why I started doing these talks also because just the amount of composers, and you mentioned Marty Ehrlich, or many guys that we talked about even today now. We can go on, John Purcell, like Ronnie Burrage, like many players you played with. I don't know, list goes on. Jerome Harris, like so many underrated guys who just are incredible players, or you included, and composers. And it's just like you really have to dig and love the music to get to your music or their music, just because the industry dictates something, some sort of a
heavy,
and
it's like iron fist that
yeah,
came. And so they were also rewarding youth. I mean, we were all young then anyway, but it was also rewarding not how original you were or authentic, but more who did you sound like.
yeah,
And that's what got so many guys that were like 19, 20, record deals that
yeah.
just had no business, And I kind of had the old school thought of like you had to like this journeyman thing, like you work your way up. But then, but it it made for a very sterile, paranoid music environment.
Yeah, yeah,
I saw my own eyes Stanley Crouch, but Dave Holland Quintet was playing. Stanley Crouch walks in the club, stares down the band. The band gets intimidated. I could tell. They all of a sudden got real self conscious. And then Stanley turns around and announces to the audience that he's going to the Vanguard because that's where some real music is happening.
are you kidding me? Wow, man.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the. It was like
yeah,
I
bizarre.
kind of felt like Berlin, 1937 or something.
Yeah, almost.
I mean, it was real, and everybody was like wearing suits, because that meant you could get a gig. And I even heard guys going up to booking agents, "Hey, I bought a suit," And I was just shocked, you know. I came into school of like, fuck, we should be wearing motorcycle jackets.
Yeah, exactly. Bizarre, man. Yeah, but yeah,
But it was a real thing, and it really affected uh, everything. I mean, it affected the psyche of musicians because it seemed like now everybody was trying to prove that they could swing, no matter who they were. And then the second movement that happened is when M bass started, which
mm,
I was invited. M bass originally was a musicians referral service, black musicians referral service. That's what. So I got an invitation, and it was called MRA, and it was like moving right along, and it was like a way to network and
mm,
you know have a database. So one of the set now I'm not a joiner, so I mean it was cool. I thought the idea was cool, and so it was like Steve Coleman was kind of in charge of it, but then all these people I knew like Jerry Allen, they were
yeah,
all there. We were all, you know, and then Smitty Smith, and then all of a sudden, it turned into M bass overnight, and I don't know what that was, but what I heard was that somebody brought a Commodore 64, and and it showed that you could do this stuff, and then Dr. T, that was the music program. I was like, and everybody went nuts, and then everybody, so it turned into that, and the next thing I knew, it became this computer collective, and then it became this kind of thing of composers that basically came out of Steve Coleman's concepts, and
yeah,
then that was the birth of it, and they were doing all this stuff, and then there was around 1986, the Village Voice put out an article called Brooklyn's Finest, which was the M bass thing, and once again it started this wave, and
yeah,
then people said, "Well, what about me?" I mean, people felt excluded once again,
yeah,
and then it's so. so for me, honestly, I saw two like kind of cultural shifts in the music, you know, that just kind of shaped and it shaped the personality, you know,
Sure.
because everybody now was concerned about also they were concerned about more of their image too. It's some kind of somehow this kind of brotherhood left, and then brother sisterhood evaporated, and now it was all about image and
Mm.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's interesting. It's now is the same almost, right? If you
yeah,
look the magazines and like what's happening, it's a
yeah,
different wave, but it's like almost the same. It's just